Is it 50%? A lot of people with good ears will care. And we just don't know yet.
So, Bill, you actually have it. We all do. They secretly made it available, at least on your Mac, as a plugin. So it's there. And of course, you can consciously choose it like in FaceTime, but in your DAW, you can choose it. It's called something slightly different. It's like
voice isolation.
Oh, maybe, yeah, that's what it's called. But in other words, it shows up just as a plugin. So you can, you can test it right away. And I use it actually in my other room, in my office, which is not treated just for meetings or whatever. I will often use it there real time, and pretty good.
It's going to be interesting to see. I mean, I'd love to see somebody who's seriously technical do measurements and say, it's this many dBs of quieting, and here's the reaction time, and here's the technical specs on how well it works objectively, because I don't know. And I don't have good enough ears to be able to tell if you switch it in and out. I know it's different and better, but I don't know whether it's the betterness is eating away frequencies that I don't want it to eat away or not. I just don't know. So, to be determined.
But for all the journalists, quote unquote, and even, the actual journalists on CNN and everywhere else that are, for years now coming to us live, what sounds like their bathroom because of the reverb and everything else from their phones. If they, I'll take whatever degradation and tiny bit of quality, but for the benefit of all of the, de-reverb and everything else from the horrible locations and mics they're using, that's a positive in my opinion.
Noise suppression, by definition, eats away at frequencies.
Well, that makes sense. Sure. But how does it isolate what is room reverb from what is core signal? And there's been a lot of work done on that. I don't know how good it is, to be honest with you, but I do know a lot of people are dialing in noise reduction and using it in even professional work now. So,
yeah, definitely. And when it comes to at least post-production work, it's different for live, of course, different for broadcast. In what do you call this? In post-production work, you have different tools for different jobs. If you're trying to get rid of early reflections, you use a different tool from trying to get rid of longer reverb tails. A different tool from broadband noise reduction, different tool from click removal.
I wonder what could have happened with that thing.
I just know it's nice to be out of the voice booth and into a room and still get a good quality signal out of there, or acceptable quality signal out of here. And it doesn't sound as boxy to me. And I'm not having to live in boxes for my whole life for voiceover. That's nice.
That's the difference between like the old style, which remember, you capture a sample of the room tone and then it just, does a dumb subtraction of that from all the frequencies.
Some critical information. My camera has actually died.
Oh, Ronnie.
Camera.
Sorry.
What? I don't know what to do.
We hold awake.
What camera is it?
ZV-E10. It died.
Oh, is it too hot?
Heating
problem?
No, it's pretty cold here, so there's something other going on.
I would turn it off and on. It does this when it wants to remap the pixels.
Yeah, just wait.
Just turn it off. Turn it on and off, or off and on.
We'll hope for your return, Ronnie.
It's always something. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your media questions 7 days a week. Let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Bill, what do we have?
First one comes from Jeff Cohen here on the panel in Miami Beach, Florida. And the question is, theories why Apple is limiting the new local capture announced at the WWDC keynote yesterday to iPad only, not iPhone, let alone Mac yet.
Go, Jeff.
Yeah, so that's the question. My theory, but I'm just curious if anyone else has it, is that, this kind of forces a slow rollout. It is the least ubiquitous device of iPhone, Mac, everything else. And we also know they've had plenty of problems in the past with cloud and syncing and all that stuff. So that's my theory, but I'm curious if anyone else has another working theory.
Good, Bill.
These are all guesses. These are guesses from me, but I think now that M4 chips are in all of their devices, the iPad has enough processing capability to do more professional level work. I mean, I always saw the iPad really as a content consumption device rather than a content creation device, and I do think that's changing. We talked a little bit during the keynote discussion that we had about how Mac OS and iOS are constantly getting closer together while the delta between the two is shrinking. And I think this is an example of that. I'm also mindful of the fact that on the Final Cut side of things, Final Cut for iPad has some capabilities that we haven't really seen anywhere else, and them taking a flagship program like Final Cut from Apple and turning it into something that functions specifically on iPad, kind of coded for that environment, tells me that they want to expand that, and I think this is a piece of that. I think they're hoping to get more and more people to adopt the iPad as a content creation tool, and this kind of fits directly into that, and upping its audio game makes perfect sense if that's their goal.
Now, I'll challenge you to say, okay, not why they added it, why didn't they add it to Mac and iPhone?
Yeah, I think that file management now with the new iPad is a lot easier, so it makes way more sense to do it there. Probably the phone would be difficult for people to manage. It's not that it can't be done, but I think that the phone is more difficult to manage that, and the Mac. I think that I think that they see that as there's a lot of other products that do this, and they're really pointed towards get an iPad to do send an iPad out. I think they want to see people use big screens without keyboards and be able to send something out, put it on a stand, and have. I think they're giving you mic inputs because the form factor I think that Apple wants to see, and I think they want to see people do, is not on their little phone, but they've got this. I think what you're going to see is a lot of, because I think we may do this with Michael Krasny's show, is I'm going to send you an iPad with a MV6. And I'm going to have you plug that in, and we're going to make sure that you tap on it or whatever, and that's going to be a very good podcast, kit that I can send out that looks nice, that is nice. I think that people would use it with their phone and it'd be weird. And the laptop, I think they are trying to generate a certain behavior, which is that, hey, this is the simplest way to do this is with an iPad. So don't send out a laptop, don't send out a whatever, because this is really, I think the double end recording is really about podcasters sending kits out. I've thought about it quite a bit. I don't think it's about people doing it on their own. It's about some executives being able to just have it there. But I really think they want to see people doing this with their, sending kits out, or an executive having something where they can just pull up. We've dealt with, you and I have dealt with many executives that probably if they just had an iPad mic system that all they have to do is pop it open and jump in and get a good recording, they use that all the time. And so I think that they're trying to get to a certain behavior that they think is going to be superior to the other experiences for the guest. Is that it's simple, it's easy, it's bad, and the laptop is a lot quirkier than that. The only thing that's missing is how do you manage remote control so that they don't have to think about anything. They can open it up, and it's a little harder on an iPad to do that. So that's the only challenge. Hey, go ahead, Ronnie.
Yeah, I was thinking hard of this, and I was really missing an announcement that said that you can do this on your phone as well. One thing that come to mind is that there is some big differences in the way the APIs are on the phone because of the calling functionality. So I was thinking maybe there is just a little bit more difficult for them to implement that double-sided recording on the phones as well.
I agree with you. I think that but it's not just that it's a difficulty, it's that it'd be more likely to be interrupted. Like on a phone, if someone doesn't really know what they're doing and so on and so forth. With an iPad, if I send it out without cellular, without connected to your, to whatever you're doing, you're not going to get interrupted ever, from that. Whereas a phone, there's many opportunities for it to interrupt the broadcast, which would make the double ending a lot more complicated and potentially a law-breaking thing. If it was still grabbing onto your audio while you were then suddenly jumping into a phone call, be more
funny, we
complicated.
hear someone's notification go off just as you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Someone's got to loose notifications. Next question.
Next question comes to us from David Brady in New York City. What are some of the panel's favorite over-ear headphones for monitoring? Open back, close back, what's the difference?
Courtney?
Well, for many years, I used the Bayer Dynamic DT480s, which kind of looked like this DT150, same, but only different different type of transducers in them. But then I switched to the Sony MDR V6s, which is kind of like the 7525s, because I liked the folding aspect of them so that they fold compactly and slip in a little bag. Also, when you put them, they're all over the ear and not open ear, because when listening critically, especially if you're recording, and back in the days when you would listen off of tape, it would be delayed. So it would be very confusing if you didn't cover your ears and heard live sounds mixed with delayed sounds. The other interesting thing that you can do with these is when they're on your head, you can flip one of the ears over so it's facing the other direction. Someone can come stick their head next to yours and listen alongside you without having to take them off your head.
Go ahead, Jeff.
So as Courtney said, close back gives you isolation. Open back tends to be a more natural and flatter frequency response, more natural sound. So on location, 7506 from Sony is a great one, not because it's the best sounding headphone, but we know it and it isolates well and they're durable. In the studio, if I'm doing mixing, mastering kind of thing, I like Sennheiser HD 650s.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, exactly what Courtney and Jeff said. Good old reliable Sony 7506.
Ronnie?
Yeah, I have to just agree. If you take a look here, that's the 7506, and I've been using that for approximately 25 years. I don't know what number this is. I just grabbed the one that are available. Another thing I do if I am on camera, I have these formed to my ears from ACS, and I also use a different type of these when I'm mixing live concerts. In addition to that, if I'm enjoying my music and just listening to nice music, I have a set of 660S from Sennheiser, which is kind of budget-wise, kind of in the middle, just really not really expensive and not really budget-friendly either. So really good sound.
Go ahead, Bill.
I'm in the 7506 club too. And the reason I'm going to stick with them probably for the rest of my career is that the ecosystem around them has grown so huge because they've been so popular for so long. You can get all sorts of ear cushions. You can get them built into aviation headsets if you really need super, super isolation. They've just been around and done the job for such a long time. They're not flat for music, and I wouldn't use them for my primary headphones, although I have been guilty of listening to music on them occasionally. But everybody who kind of works in the industry knows what to expect, and they're very good on voices. So if you're monitoring dialogue, they're just sharp enough in that area so you don't miss like flubbed lines. I like that.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, and one thing I miss about my old Bayer DT480s is the removable cable. 90% of all headphone failures is the cable, especially if you have them around your neck and you forget they're around your neck and you get up and walk away from the console with a cable attached. This one, the Bayers had this removable plug. So the cable's plugged in. You could replace the straight cable or a coiled cable, that little screw that anchored it in there so it wouldn't come unplugged. But then when you destroy your cable, you don't have to, send them out to be repaired. You could just pop on a new cable and you're back in business in moments.
Next question.
Next one comes from Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Brevard, North Carolina right now. I just did a test on iOS 26 for iPhone. Attached is my MixPre 6. The new audio device selection is awesome, but I noticed that you cannot select a different device for listening than the mic. Thoughts?
Jeff?
Well, first of all, you mentioned iPhone, which of course is interesting because they only specified that for iPad. They did not talk about that for iPhone, which goes back to our previous discussion. Perhaps some of these features, and maybe you can even tell us if they show up on iPhone. But my first guess or maybe question is whether or not you're trying to make that selection in the app itself, depending on which app you're using, and does that app have the ability. And, presumably if there's something that the app needs to do specifically, they obviously haven't had the time or ability to do that. So perhaps that's something that app developers will be able to build in, is based on that new feature, be able to offer discrete selection of input and output.
Yeah, it's an interesting problem. I think that, again, it's also part of, I would put it up to first try. So they're turning it on. I think that will probably come. I wouldn't be surprised if it happened by the time we got to a release in October, but it may take longer. We'll see. They may have made a decision about trying to keep it simple. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri. Last night, my venue's director let me know that we'd be starting late because of a technical issue. No clips for a speaker's lavalier cable. I asked him to get me a Sharpie. I grabbed a mini C47 and voila! What's your MacGyver solution to something?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Making sure it's the right Jeff. We probably all have these, and I love the MacGyvers. I'm accused of doing too much MacGyver stuff. One simple thing, which wasn't even really show-related, but because we all have this gear, I had to remove something from a wall that was glued on there. And it was glued too much, and I was, concerned. I didn't want to rip the paint off. So, of course, I grab a big mic stand and grab a bunch of clips and clip a hairdryer. Yes, I have a hairdryer in the home, and clipped it to it and let it just sit there unattended and heat up the glue. And when I came back a few minutes later, whoop, came right off.
Jeff?
Since it's audio day, I'm going to pull one from the dark ages of digital audio. So one of the first open reel digital multitrack machines was Mitsubishi, the Pro-Digi X80 and X86. It was 32 channel, 24-bit, ran at 50 kilohertz, and we needed to transfer, if you remember Patti Smythe and the song The Warrior, we were transferring that, needed to get it onto Sony Multitrack at 48K 3348, PCM 3348. And so we had the digital connection to connect our rental machine into the Sony machine, but 32 channels on the 24 channels of 24-bit didn't work. So we needed a way to use the patch bay on the Mitsubishi, which was a little tiny pins where you could actually put jumper cables, and they didn't send the jumper cables with the rental. So I scoured through the shop of everybody's voltmeter and pulled their test probes off their voltmeter and alligator clipped together all the channels that I needed to transfer. How did we get it to run at the right sample rate? A square wave signal generator plugged into the word clock. You can set whatever sample rate you want if you have a square wave signal generator.
We had a problem where we had a bunch of rack mounted equipment that we didn't have a rack for, and we needed to make sure that they all stayed together. They kept on sliding around. They were sitting on a desk. The rack was ordered, like it just hadn't shown up yet, but we needed to go into production, and so we just gaff taped them down the side. So we just pulled them all together and just ran gaff tape down to keep them held together, and we then from then on referred to that as a gaff rack. Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington's up next. How do you make note of the mistakes in one production so that they do not carry over into future productions? Maintain an RFI document, perhaps?
Jeff?
Yeah, I'm big on note-taking. I'm also really big on templates for this very reason, and automation for projects where there's another episode or another event. So I try and log as much as possible, and then I take anything that needs to carry forward or remind me of something that I didn't think of before that I know I'll forget into templates. So, for example, if it's a show and there's another episode, when it's time for the next episode, the recording, let's say, of a next episode or a next show, automation takes different bits from all the learnings of what I know, so I don't have to repeat manual steps, including templates, which now has, some to-dos. I've marked which ones are important, and you could make that modular, some things that are kind of universal for anything, so you don't have to put them in every template, and then modular pieces for a particular show, particular client, and automate the heck out of it. But templates save saved my bacon because it does exactly that. It carries forward everything I learned. And I'll plug one other thing, which is really handy. And these guys have just amazing tool set. I encourage everyone to at least check them out. And this is editingtools.io. And let me just see if you're seeing. Yeah, so this is just one of many tools. They have this live time code notes, which is either on desktop, web-based, and then they have a team version where more than one people can be logging the show, and then you can sync it all up. You can export it in a number of formats. They just released a mobile app for both iOS and Google, and you can customize the heck out of it, like what buttons you want the people that will be logging the show to have notes. You could, so I export these into my editor, so I have them all as markers, and they have a ton of other tools, many free, some paid, but I encourage you to check that out. They help with a lot of this stuff.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Like Jeff said, having a list of kind of a checklist of what needs to happen keeps you from making mistakes you made before. You always try to make new mistakes. Don't make the mistakes you've already made. So having that's broken down by show time. If you're doing a repeating show, 30 minutes before the show, 25 minutes before the show, breaking down, making sure that you're doing all those things on the checklist, having a notes doc where as things occur, you write them in there, and then regular team meetings. So you discuss things that were problems and how to remedy them in the future.
Mickey?
Yeah, for me, for the longest time, let me start again. I think it starts from the top, encouraging the crew to be able to be open about what didn't work and what worked with the production. And this could be critiques of the people that are at the higher position in the crew hierarchy, like a supervisor or a department head. It really starts from the top, to be able to make the crew comfortable to share these things. I've always encouraged my crew, the people under me, to talk to me about what doesn't work. And oftentimes I start the conversation or restart the conversation, like during the wrap dinner, for example. The earlier, the better, because it's fresh in their minds. And since the start of office hours, I've learned that I should also encourage them to take notes at the point in time that it happens, or at the point of time they think of something, because again, when everything's over, everything's done, they easily forget. People easily forget what did not work and what worked. So as soon as possible, if they can write it down and then communicate it again as soon as possible, that would be best.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, usually when you make a mistake, I store that information in a new fold that happens in my cerebellum because it's so traumatic. I will always remember it and not suffer that mistake again. But if I need to inform others of what mistakes were made, I'm horrible at handwriting. I can't even read my own handwriting, much less make a note for somebody else to read. And I got pretty good when doing audio at recording verbal notes at the end of a take. On the take. This is back when all audio was then transferred to another media. So it had to be listened to from beginning to end. And so that verbal note was always on the audio, always went along with the place where the error occurred. And I described it. Nowadays with voice to text operation, it's a lot easier to make verbal notes into a phone or any device that has that ability to translate your voice into text. So you can use Google Keep or anything else that supports voice note taking to transfer that into a text form that can then be shared with others.
One of the things we did pretty often in Pixel Core was that we would give everybody their own document. So we didn't want people seeing the other documents. We didn't want people to do a pile on and go, oh yeah, we just want to see what people saw from their own perspective. It also, so we would give them their own Google document. All of those would feed back in. So we'd own all those documents that we could see. And then we would encourage people. And the most important thing is, beyond all the technology, is making it safe to say that something isn't working. So I would go in there myself and put things in the RFA, like the sandwiches were cold, my chair wasn't very comfortable. I didn't do that because I really cared that much about any of those things. I did it because it showed people what I was willing to hear. Like I'm putting this in. This is okay to do, and then it opened up the gig playing, so people complain. And something would happen. What was really funny was when it was really at full force, something would happen in the event, and you see everybody's head go down, and you knew that they were all typing the same thing, like this didn't work or this didn't. And there's a couple of things about it. One thing that we definitely discouraged was trying to come up with a solution, because that would distract people. You just say in one line what isn't working, enough that you can remember it. Don't try to write an epic on it. So we wouldn't give you much room in the Google Doc to write something, so it was uncomfortable. I didn't set it up for wraparound or anything else. So you just kind of wrote a little note. The other thing it did was a real, it's a pressure reliever. People say something that they're angry about, knowing that, now the key is people have to know that it will be addressed later. So they have to feel like it's going to be, so you have to do postmortems where you go through those things. If they feel like they're just putting it into the ether, no one's going to, people stop doing it. So the key was we would have postmortems the following week, sometimes 2 weeks, depending on how busy our schedule was. At one point, we were doing 3 to 5 events a week. So it was, but we would pull these up. We have never evolved so fast. Like when you're doing 3 to 5 events a week and everybody's doing RFIs and you're filling this out. And the key is that we would keep the RFIs connected because they had the same naming convention with that event. When we came to the event the next year, we went back to the RFIs of what didn't work at that event, at that location with those things, so that we could remember what we had to correct for that specific client, whatever. And that got down to a point where we were picking certain colors for our chargers and all kinds of other things. Because when you turn that filter on, that you're willing to listen to all those things, you start paying attention to all these weird little things. And it made our spaces and the run so much smoother because we were constantly improving. And you forget it. It's not that you forget it at the end of the event. You forget it 5 minutes after it happened. Like if you're doing a big event, the adrenaline and everything else that you're doing, all the stuff, you'll forget what many of these little things, not the big things. The big things you'll remember, when the power supplies catch fire or something like that. You'll remember that. You'll tell stories about that, but you won't remember the little bits and pieces that if we just tighten that up a little bit, it would be that much nicer. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Ray Early in Los Angeles, and Ray wonders, I'm going to make videos of 2 people having a discussion on location and while driving to that location. Think comedians in cars getting coffee. How should I mic them, and should I mic them differently when in the car versus out of it? And he'd like us to have specific mics in mind.
Courtney?
Well, it depends. It depends on a couple of things. Whether or not you're okay with having a mic in the shot, like a clipped lavalier on the outside of clothing, or whether you're concealing microphones under clothing. Be aware that if you're putting a lavalier on someone and they're going to be getting into a car and driving, that seatbelts have to be fastened, and seatbelts that with shoulder straps go diagonally across the body and cover the area usually where the perfect placement for a lavalier microphone is. So you could be dealing with a terrible situation where you put the mic on the people, you put them in the car, they fasten their seatbelts, and you get nothing but clothing noise from the seatbelt rubbing across the microphone the entire way. So in cars, I kind of prefer an open mic that is mounted in the car with like maybe a Sheps with a Colette mount. So it's a low profile and a small shock mount just underneath the frame. It also depends on how you're going to cover them. If you're going to cover them where you see more of their body than not, or if you can conceal the microphone behind the dashboard low out of the shot, that to me sounds a little bit better, but you have to, these days, most people don't drive with their windows open, so drive with their windows closed and make sure that the air conditioner's off in the car. And then you can use lavaliers on the people once they get out of the car and go into let's say, a coffee shop or something. And that way you can stay with the concealed microphones without fear of destroying your audio with a lap belt.
Go ahead, Bill.
So the last time I had to do this, we had a whole series that I had to do for corporate where we had to follow a character around in a car and then getting into things. My choices, I kept a lavalier, an ECM77 Sony, which is a pretty broad frequency lavalier, clipped to the visor on the passenger side right in front of them. They were doing most of the dialogue. And that worked really, really well for me. I kept it a couple of inches down from the top of the car. And that's about the same distance of a lavalier on the chest between that head, that visor and their mouth. And then that cut really well with my Sennheiser 416 for outdoor stuff. So I used to carry both ECM 77s and ECM 44s, which is another Sony lavalier, but it did not sound anywhere close to that little shotgun. So those two mics, the 77 and the 416, were close enough where I could post-process it and get a pretty even thing both in and out of the car. So that was my solution.
Good, Mickey.
Yeah, I've done a lot of unscripted work, and when this format came out of the Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, everyone wanted to just copy the format. Done dozens and dozens of these. Primary would be, for us, would be a lavalier, Sanken Cost 11, DPA 4460, or a Countryman B3 or B6, depending on what the wardrobe is like. But in the car, they would, of course, the crew would be pre-rigging a camera rig in the car, usually 3 cameras, right at the windshield. And there we would mount either a DPA, DPA 4097 micro shotgun, or as Courtney mentioned earlier, Shep's Colette series. Usually this includes the Colette series from Shep's is a modular system wherein you can mix and match different capsules with different preamps, with different mounting solutions, different cable extensions. And it's really versatile because you can have just like, I'm a big fan of the MK41 microphone capsule. This is a tiny, tiny microphone capsule that sounds magnificent. And you can pair that with a CMC 1K or CMC 1KV preamplifier, which gives you a tiny, tiny microphone package that you can mount anywhere. Like you can mount it like this, like this, like they have examples on their website. And you can mount 2 or a couple of them right where you would be pre-rigging those cameras at the dashboard or at the windshield of the car. And they sound lovely. You would want to, of course, work with your production team. I'm assuming this is coming from a location sound mixer point of view. Work with your production team in terms of talking with the cam dep. Where will you be mounting your cameras? Can I rig along with your cameras? Are you going to be putting lights? Will those lights, will my microphone interfere with any of the pre-rigging you might be doing? With that, you would, of course, want to drop a bag in the car to record all the car-related dialogue and noises. And also, by the way, if the car is a character in this, you might want to like mic up the engine bay and also the exhaust there to get some effects for your post-production team. But I do want to mention that I don't know if you're coming at this as the location sound mixer or if you're the producer. If you're the producer or the director, I would just hire a location sound team to do this. I know some people that have actually worked on Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, and they would usually go out with anywhere from 3 to 4 man team. You would have your primary location sound mixer, which goes with the production as the car drives around. Then you would have 1 or 2 people at the different checkpoints where they stop over, and they would leapfrog each other. And then in addition to that, you'd usually have a utility that would be helping man all the microphones. So just a 3 or 4 person team to do all of that. Just hire, if you're the producer, hire a team that knows how to do this and execute it well.
Next question.
Jeff Cohen in Miami Beach here on the panel. What is the courtroom headset system being utilized for the sidebar at 2 minutes and 6 seconds in a video linked below? And it's something in front of the jury, and he's got a link there.
I go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, this I saw for the first time and is just interesting to me. I don't know if anyone knows what it is. let me see if you guys can see this. So judge calls a sidebar, and then instead of the normal, which we've all seen TV movies, they all go and huddle up next to the judge, and then you get a commercial, which I always assumed to be for the purposes of making sure the jury is not hearing it, and reporters, and nowadays, of course, live streaming. So they're all they all put these headsets on, and we hear the jury excuse later, so we know the jury's still there. So I'm just curious if anyone has any insight, what's going on there.
Courtney?
Yeah, I took a look at it. It is an interesting concept, but I think it comes out of the way that this particular courtroom was constructed. It seems that the normal where you would have a sidebar where people could approach the bench and they would go to the side of the bench where the judge is. This one has a giant media control center, as some type of assistant. The judge's clerk is sitting beside the judge. So there's no place for the lawyers to even walk up and approach the side of the bench. You've got you're surrounded, and of course the witness box is on the right side. So I guess they had to resort to this. They also may have had to resort to this during COVID, when perhaps witnesses and or lawyers would have to be remotely brought into the courtroom, and so they would have to have headsets on to hear when they do a sidebar from the remote person anyway. So maybe they went to these comms type headsets. They could be gamer headsets. I didn't see any of them close enough to try and identify the type of the brand of them, but interesting concept. If there are people in the if there are viewers behind the different lawyers, the defense, and they could probably hear the conversation, at least one side of it, pretty well. Better than if the lawyers got up and walked away and walked up right next to the judge.
And that's what I always thought the concern was. The primary reason for the sidebar is to discuss something that the jury does not hear.
Yeah, I think that if they thought it was important, they might go into judges' chambers. I think that most sidebars are, you definitely want to keep them silent, but it's not like it's totally kept away from the jury. The jury can kind of hear the murmurings of them talking back and forth. It also depends on the lawyers, of how resonant their voice is. There are some lawyers that you could hear no matter what they were doing with the sidebar. I'm going to guess that this happened during COVID. They started doing this in COVID. They decided that it worked. They had built a bunch of new monitors and computers and everything else so they could do Zoom. And then they just were like, well, let's just keep using it because it's easier. There's a whole bunch of advantages to this, of being able to keep track of it. Right now, when you do a sidebar, the stenographer still has to come over. And it used to be in the old days, the stenographer would pull their thing over there and start typing. And oftentimes they had to do the sidebar near the stenographer because they still have to record everything that was said there in that sidebar. And so this makes it easier to theoretically record it and keep it there if they choose to. So forcing everything to go through microphones is an interesting puzzle. I don't think that they have to do their opens, closes, crosses, everything else with the microphones. But it is interesting to think about the idea of rather than just having stenographers, really having everything be recorded. It's interesting. Next question.
Roscoe Jones is up next from Madison, Indiana. Why would you use an SE Electronics V7 microphone instead of the Shure SM58, since they are competitively priced? How would the acoustics of the room affect your choice for a close-up dynamic mic for PA use?
Jeff?
I really like the SE V7. It's, SM58 is a great mic. The V7 is maybe a little flatter in the frequency response. There's the V7. And if we take a look at the 58, it's got a little, now the scale is different. We've got 5 dB at that peak there, but it's a little flatter. So it's a little more natural sounding for speech. It is supercardioid. So it is a little bit tighter polar pattern. Now that's supercardioid versus cardioid is only a dB and a half or so of advantage, but that's not a bad thing. Some of the things I like about it is it's available in a whole bunch of different colors. So if you're flashy, you can get all different kinds of looks. The basic microphone there or the black one are great, and don't be thrown by the red underneath the grill cloth. They give you a black pop filter that you can unscrew that cover, pull out the red and put the black in there so you can get a very subtle look or a very flashy look, whatever you like.
Good, Mickey.
To my ears, the SEV7 sounds a little brighter and crisper than an SM58 would. I don't know if the others, if Jeff agrees. But so for me, while I very easily default to the SM58 because it's everywhere. I have here one right here, and that wasn't staged. SM58s are everywhere, and so I regularly default to it. But in situations wherein I have someone with maybe quite a low voice or dark sounding voice, and I want to bring a little brightness and clarity to their voice, I might opt for something like an SEV7 just because of that crisper response.
Go ahead, Ronnie.
I'm thinking of those two microphones as a little bit different, as already said. I think the Beta 58 is a little bit more similar to the CV7 and still not exactly the same. But the Beta 58 is also supercardioid and a little bit brighter. I think this comes down to what the talent is normally using when they are producing whatever they are producing. If it's only spoken words, that's another thing. But if it's music, the artist is tending to have their favorite microphone. And if they are adding the SM58 to the rider, they would like to have a SM58 on the stage as well. And the sound engineer that mixes this band or artist several times a week would probably also prefer to have the same microphone that the artist is usually being mixed on. And adding new microphones in the middle of an tour or recording session is normally not done. They tend to use the same type of microphones to have the same type of sound. So I think if you're a new user, a new singer or something that are going to get your first microphone, you might as well get the SEV7 and not just jump on the SM58 train. So it's up to you.
Go, Jeff.
I forgot one of my favorite features, a little tiny touch about this microphone. If you look closely at the ring around the mesh at the top, it is not round. It's actually got bumps in it. So if you set this mic down, it will not roll away from you. So it makes perfect mic for talkback and things like that, where you're picking up a mic, talking into it, and then putting it down. They do make a push to talk version and a switch version as well. So those the little touches, they really kind of improved it.
It's the little things. Next question.
Pedro G. Gonzalez III in Orlando, Florida. How would someone use a limiter to equalize audio in blockbuster movies? And he notes TV is connected to a digital mixer.
Mickey?
I'm sorry, but no, please don't. Just don't. Don't do that. Please listen to content with how it's intended to be listened to and watched. And in the consumer space and home theater, AVRs, AV receivers, there's often a feature that's called like night mode or low dynamic range mode. You can turn that on. But I wouldn't do that. I'd like to watch what or listen to what I'm meant to be listening to.
Courtney?
There are OSHA standards when playing a film in a public theater that you can't exceed, the threshold of pain. There are certain sound levels that you're not supposed to exceed. Also for broadcast, they use limiters frequently. Recently, there was a problem for decades of commercials coming on television. The commercials are much louder than the TVs because there's more than the TV program itself, because there's more compression used in the commercial, and all the sound is like within 3 dB of the top end. They did come out with a audio leveling standard. The EU did, called R128, so you can look up those standards for broadcast television to try and get a common level or a precise level from producing television programs, so that when they go to play out the program and the commercial and anything else that is submitted to the television station for play out, that the audio levels match pretty closely. But Telos and a number of other companies make broadcast auto level controls that get the levels closer together, so that people won't complain that the commercials are blasting them out. When they go to the TV show, they have to turn the volume up, and then it goes back to the commercial, and then blasts them out again. So it prevents that from happening. And there are newer standards in the current broadcast standards that try and control that to some degree.
Next question.
Conrad in Atlanta wonders, I came across a streamer on Twitch with a multicam setup that instantly auto switches the camera angle based on the camera he looks at. How is that done?
Go ahead, Ronnie.
I think it could be using something as magical as a foot switch, which I've tried and is not. I don't like that. The other thing is that there are plugins that actually senses where a person is looking. So it could be a plugin that is actually watching and analyzing the feeds coming into, for instance, OBS. I'm pretty sure I've seen something like this plugin functionality in OBS. So it could be that as well. But from a personal standpoint, I would never leave it to automatic switching. Maybe I could feel that if you have a panel with a lot of people, I could use the microphone feeds to do automatic switching based on that. For instance, in Mimo Live, you have a kind of webcam radio plugin that actually does that pretty well. So I would go with a hardware thing like a foot switch.
Jeff?
And sorry, maybe this is, Ronnie, what you just mentioned, but I know there are some that if your cameras are still, the mics are opened, they're basing it off of the audio signal coming into that camera's mic. Not that they're using the audio, but they're making that switching based on that.
Courtney?
And of course, all still cameras these days have face detection and eye detection that can tell, who's looking at the camera and who's not. And there's even AI gaze correction now that actually, if you're looking off the camera like this, it can correct your eyeballs to make them back down the center of the lens in real time. I don't know how they do it, but it does correct your gaze for in the lens. If you're looking at a cue card, let's say that's off to the side, it will correct the gaze so that it's looking in the lens for news readers and people where you want that down the barrel look.
If you have questions and you don't want to log into Makana, or you just don't, you're on the road thinking about it, you can just open up your phone and go to askofficehours.global, and just that's all you got to do is go to askofficehours.global, throw that question in. It'll go into a drop that we can then bring them in, and people still vote on them, but so some of them don't get there immediately. But if you throw that into the drop, we'll throw it into Makana and let people vote it up. So askofficehours.global. Next question.
Next one comes from John Foltz in Seelings Grove, Pennsylvania. On Monday, Alex talked about dictating questions to ChatGPT on his phone. How do you set that up? Do I need a paid account, he wonders.
Jeff?
I meant to answer after you tell them what you're doing, Alex.
Yeah, go ahead, Ronnie.
Yeah, so it could be that you need a paid account. I'm not sure of that. I think voice interaction with ChatGPT is a paid thing. But what I've done is just have a double tap on the backside of the phone, which actually just brings up. So you have to unlock it first, and if you're in the car, you have to, of course, tell them that you are not driving, etc., and just double tap on the backside of the phone, and then you have speech mode enabled. So that's an easy setup.
It's very complicated. Again, I don't know whether you needed to have it. I don't know what you need to have there, but I have a paid version of ChatGPT because I use it all the time. But there is a shortcut that's available with ChatGPT that is called voice mode. So basically, when I push in my button on my phone and I just say, hey Shlomo, start chat, it immediately just I use that as the trigger. And then that just opens up ChatGPT in voice mode, and I'm able to start talking to it. So I don't have to think about anything. I just say I want to start the chat, and then I'm off to the races. And I use it all the time. It's not so much things that I'm working on with ChatGPT. It's just general curiosity. I'm driving. I don't quite know enough about this thing, or I'm trying to figure something out, or I'm just randomly. Yesterday I was talking to ChatGPT about why the population was crashing in Bulgaria. for no apparent reason other than it showed up in a forum. Someone showed something that was a weird graph, and I was like, "So what's going on here?" And ChatGPT explained the whole thing and the whole process for me. So those are the kind of things that I use it for. But it's just a shortcut that says the shortcut itself is called voice mode. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. I saw an article in Mix where ESL used an Allen and Heath dLive console to mix the Intel Extreme Masters. Wouldn't that be difficult if the console doesn't directly support immersive panning?
Mickey?
Douglas, I'm assuming you're talking about mixing for broadcast as opposed to mixing for front of house or for the room. If they, I don't know if they were mixing in immersive or surround format or stereo, but since you mentioned immersive, the dLive series can indeed mix 5.1. But if you need larger formats, like say need to mix for Dolby Atmos, for example, you can get panning engines and Atmos object engines from Dolby themselves, or from companies such as what do you call this? Telos. They have their Dolby Atmos object processors that can not only handle the panning of it, but also the encoding into Dolby Digital plus JOC, which stands for Joint Object Coding. So you can do the panning there, and that's how Atmos broadcasts were done before there were native Atmos capable mixing consoles.
Next question.
Next one comes from Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri. If my only need is to check my mic level, is the YouLean meter still preferred on desktop, Mac, and Windows?
Go ahead, Ronnie.
Yeah, for us, we were using the YouLean meters all the time. There are situations where we don't use it, but I take this question as an option a possibility to show off my new gadget from Small Rig, which is I'm coming to this. This is related. So we put our iPad in these new shaded mounts. We have them on a magic arm sitting on the side of the fly rack. And we are running the YouLean app for iPads, and that is a network-fed app. And we have on our Mac Mini, we feed the audio from Audio Hijack into a YouLean object that is transmitting the audio data as just plain data, not audio, into the app running on the iPad. And that makes it a beautiful meter on an iPad mini size on the top of the audio mixer. It's beautiful.
You know, that holder is really, if you take two magic arms and you get the larger version of that holder, it goes right in front of your exercise bike monitor. And it just suspends an iPad right in front of it, just in case you're wondering. Not that I would ever do that. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah. When you mention checking your mic level, and sorry, I'm just looking. Oh, it's Vic Hernandez. When you mention checking your mic level, I'm assuming this is for like a simple just Zoom meeting, because you're checking the mic yourself instead of like checking the mic of a talent. For simple tasks like that, I'm a big fan of using what we use here in office hours, the WLM meter from Waves, and I like it. And this is metering my microphone right now, and I like it because it has quite large displays for the actual loudness readings here. Like we were seeing a large display of -26, -25, and so on, compared to YouLean, which has a bit more complex default view, which might be a little harder to read if you're just monitoring or metering your own mic. Another option that I really like for this is iZotope's Insight, and I like iZotope Insight because its UI can be very customizable depending on what you need. And again, this is iZotope Insight measuring my microphone right now, and right now I have the loudness readings up here, and I also have just a standard peak/RMS meter combo at the bottom, and I can adjust how much of each I want to see. I can even close down the meters below and just see loudness. I can customize what I see here. If I want, I can put a little jellyfish meter here. I can look at the history of my levels, intelligibility measurements, spectrum analyzer here, or in the spectrogram, or I can enable all of these and get really detailed with it. So it's a really nice meter, but you can just focus on your loudness if that's all you want to look at, and you get nice big numbers there.
Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas comes up next. Bone conduction headsets are great for swimming and working out, but what are the pros and cons of these in the world of professional media?
Mickey?
So yeah, you do see bone conduction headsets given as an option for a headset monitoring for comms belt packs, or even two-way radios that you often find in events and film sets. And that's where they're really handy, because it allows people to have both ears open while still hearing what's on comms. But the thing is, they do not work that great when you're in a really loud environment, because it obviously doesn't give you a nice seal in your ears. So it's quite rare that we get requests from crew members that say they do want to opt for a bone conduction headset as opposed to either a surveillance earpiece or a standard 1-cup or 2-cup comms headset.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, for comms, they would work great. It does leave your ears open. One thing, when operating as a prompter operator, I hate the fact that someone always comes up to me and tries to talk to me while I'm rehearsing with someone who's reading the teleprompter. So I have to be laser focused on the screen and what they're reading and listening to them to keep everything in sync. And then when somebody comes up to me and starts talking to me, not realizing that I'm rehearsing with the talent on the other side of the stage, it's quite disconcerting. And that's why I always use over-the-ear headphones, so that they know I can't hear them or that I'm not listening to them. But bone conduction, I would not use them for critical listening. They're great for comms or for monitoring, just a signal to know when something's there. They're good for people who have certain types of hearing loss, because if their hearing loss is created by the coupling bones or a punctured eardrum, let's say, it can solve some of those problems and let them hear more clearly. My brother-in-law has hearing loss after years of being exposed to, large guns in the Navy. And he finds that the shocks, bone conduction, let him hear a lot more clearly. And yet, when his wife yells at him, he can still hear her, too.
Very good. I use them pretty heavily for comms. And the reason that I use them there is because I'm usually listening to program with in-ears. So being able to listen to put in-ears or over the head, and I can listen to programs so I can hear what's actually going on, but I hear comms over top of that is pretty useful. Batteries, a wireless battery connection. A couple things that I do is, number one is that all of my headsets are connected only to my phone. I do not connect them to anything else. I don't connect them to computers or iPads or anything else. They are for my one phone. And so they only know how to connect to that one phone. That way they're not ever going to jump from one thing to another. Second is I have 3 of them. so I can very quickly, just because they're all to that one phone and they're all there, I can just open up another one and fire it up. The only challenge you get into is forgetting to turn it off and having been in one and have another one somewhere in some other room that's on, and it can jump to that. But that's the only downside of that. But you get really good at, you never take them off your head without turning them off. And so I keep them charged. And I use them constantly for that, and it's just and I learned it from JJ, so the who was the first one to show them to me. But I use them primarily for anytime I'm using phone comms. I feel like I'm using real comms, then I use something else. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney. I make Mickey.
Yeah, I assume. Alex, you're talking about specifically about the shocks, bone conduction.
Yeah, I want to be very specific about that. You're right. It's the shocks open comms are the only ones that I use, and that's because they have a boom. And so the noise cancellation on that boom is pretty amazing. So you can do a lot of things and walk around, and people don't hear any of the stuff around it, and it's a much clearer voice. The difference between a shocks open comm and every other bone conduction headset is night and day, in my opinion. Next question.
But yeah,
you're gonna
sorry.
say, Mickey. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say that the likes of RTS, Riedel, Clearcom, they do have their own bone conduction headsets that work with wired with their belt
Mhm.
packs and their key panels, so you don't have to rely on Bluetooth, which you don't really want to rely on for mission critical use.
Next question.
Paul Kovacs in Elkhart, Indiana, looking for a cheap portable monitor that can also flip the image to use as a teleprompter and or conference monitor. Most cheap portable monitors don't do that. Anyone come across a cheap one lately that will?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I would take a look at the at ICANN. They have nice, affordable teleprompters. They're not the best of the best, but they're at a good price. And they do have what they call a conversion kit, which essentially is a monitor with rails that go on, or mounting solution that goes on 15 millimeter rod rails. I'm not sure if they're also compatible with 19 mil, but it looks like it's designed for 15 mil. And this system at the 650 US is a 4x3 monitor, which is what you would want for teleprompter use.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I've been using these ones from eYoYo, which is a funny name, but the letter E and then yo-yo. This is an 8-inch. They have a variety of inputs. They have HDMI inputs. They have composite video inputs. They have VGA inputs, and a BNC input that takes a standard AV, so it doesn't take. It also has YPBR inputs as well, but they do have an image flip in them. They make 8-inch and 15-inch. They're not super high resolution. You can see this one is 1024 by 768. I also got one of these smaller, sorry about the ad, Viltrox DC550 monitors, which is a handy touchscreen monitor. It has scopes and things built into it. It does have, I believe it has image reverse left-right in it. And it's a higher resolution 1080p monitor, and they're fairly reasonably priced. You can see they're about $168. So either one of those, I don't know if it's that 5-inch is big enough to use for as a teleprompter and monitor. I would go something bigger, 8-inch or 15-inch though.
Go ahead, Bill.
So I'm using the Lilliput. It's a little more expensive than Courtney's at about, I think, $160 or something like that, but it's pretty solid. And it is a 4K small form, I think 7-inch monitor that does flip and the rest of that. It's been really rock solid in my prompter rig. So there's a level below the $500-600 level that you can get into if you want something. This has been real reliable for me.
Go ahead, Mickey.
I just wanted to add as well that the ICANN system that I showed earlier does not have an SDI input. So if you're sourcing from a digital HDMI, or if you're in terms of digital inputs, it only has HDMI. So if your source is a standard SDI prompter source, then you would have to add a converter in the line.
Next question.
Next question comes from Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. Can you use a Stream Deck pedal with Companion? I'm not seeing an obvious way to map the pedals.
Ronnie?
Yeah, there is some weirdness going on there. I don't think you see the pedal as a USB source. You just have to map it like keys. So you have to assign it to one of the pages and use the XY coordinates for those top left buttons. So that's 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and use those as references to read the buttons on the. But there's a lot of confusion on how to get this. I don't think you will see it as a USB source. I don't have that unit myself. I've just been working with people that had these problems.
Next question.
Next one comes from Rafat Assayed in Toronto. I'm exploring intercom solutions like Unity Intercom Cloud. Is it possible to route the master mix to the host via a virtual cable, both remotely and on-site? Also, how can I set up a mix minus for the host mic in vMix? Thanks.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, there's a lot to break down here. First off, Unity Intercom Cloud, the cloud version, or the cloud service rather, is very, very, very limited in capability. I would not try to do mix minus and IFB through through Unity Cloud. I would build out an actual Unity server, or if everything's on-prem, uh, get a hardware intercom system for this. In terms of setting things up in vMix to create a mix minus, you'd want to go into the audio outputs settings of vMix and enable one of your additional buses. There are on top of the main left and right bus, there are 7 additional buses labeled A to G that you can enable. And to enable them, you will need to assign an output, an audio interface for that bus to go out of. Once you have enabled those, you will see buttons on each of your individual audio sources to route that audio source to that bus. And once it's at that bus, you can create your own mix there and send it out where it needs to go. I do want to say though that if your host or your talent is on-prem and you have other audio sources that are on-prem that need to go in their ears, like say for example a co-host microphone that's also on site, you do not want to do any of the mix minusing in software. You will you'll encounter latency that would be unbearable for the host to listen to. You'd want to have your A1 create the mix minus on their mixing console, and then utilize like either your intercom, a hardware intercom system, or a dedicated DSP, like say something from Symmetrics or something from BSS, to do your interrupts, your ducking of your mix minus, so that you can have say for example your director, your producer interrupt the mix minus going into your talent's ear and give a full IFB chain there. Don't do it in software if it's on-prem.
One last question, because Jeff's here, and we've got one more question that Jeff can answer. Go ahead.
Has anyone ever used Max, wonders Douglas Carmichael.
Go, Jeff.
So Max is a product made by a company that's Cycling 74, and it is Max MSP and Jitter incorporated into it, and it's a very deep music and performance audio coding system. So you pipe together inputs and outputs, and you can modify things. It's designed for live performance, taking audio sources, MIDI sources, controller sources. I've seen people turn a Wii controller into a three-dimensional conducting wand, all kinds of things in performance. And Ableton has taken this and incorporated it into Ableton Live. So there's now Max for Live. And they've given you pre-designed patches, and people in the community can submit patches to that. And then there's some capability to actually modify those. I've not used the Ableton version of this, but it looks to be very powerful. I think Ableton's only taken the audio music side of this. Max MSP, Cycling 74's product, actually has a bunch of this same processing for video signals as well. So you can do live processing of video for performance.
And I think Todd Reynolds, our own Todd Reynolds, has shown it in some of his performances. So he's had extensive use of it. Thank you so much to all the great questions. Of course, this is an audio-heavy day. We had a great audio panel here to answer your questions. Remember that Wednesdays are a great day to ask those audio questions. So make sure to bring them in. Sometimes the one with the Unity comms that came in about vMix that came in right at the very end, that one we kind of held. Like I was like, I think we just wait until Wednesday for that one, and it paid off. So thank you so much for all the great questions, audio questions, and other questions from the producers. And thanks to the panelists who make that possible, that we can answer those questions. I can't do this without you. And thanks to the incredible team on the back end that makes this possible. There's a small village that gets up 7 days a week, uses different applications, sometimes more than 7 times a week. We get up and whether it's in the evening or Sundays or Saturdays or the weekdays, there's different systems and different teams that make this possible every single day. And we have not missed a day since March 25th, 2020. Today, if we had done this in person, we would have traveled 16,000 miles. That's 26,000 kilometers, and that is 130 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours. You
I have
need to
HBO
show.
Max. I operate that all the time. It doesn't interface with the Wii controllers.
Doesn't. There you go. Yeah. Has anyone used Max? Yeah, I watched a movie on it yesterday. I didn't get to. I didn't get to show off my. I built my first 3D model in Blender. I'm learning Blender. And it's much easier just to.
What did you model? What object?
It's very high tech. The grid for my room. I had
so it's
it was one
grid.
of those things. I kept on drawing it, and I was like, no, I got to build a 3D model of the grid because I'm spending a lot of money. The Hollander connectors. I mean, it's the speed rail is one thing. The Schedule 40 is one thing, and then there's the connectors. The connectors cost more than the speed rail does.
I spent a couple of $1,000 on my IFF studio rail in the last studio, but it's really good once you get it up there.
I'm about 3,000 in, so it's
and now that aluminum tariffs have doubled, you can count on them being
well. And what's really
Even
cool
more.
is that I built it, and this is the USDZ version, so I can literally open it up in my room and go, oh, is that actually going to work? So